If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it, Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Today we venture into the fog of mystery surrounding an intentionally little explained character from Tolkien's Fellowship of the Ring, Tom Bombadil. While he was cut from Peter Jackson's films, Tom will be making his first ever on-screen debut in the upcoming Rings of Power Season 2. Since he's notoriously been left out of any film adaptation, you might believe that Tom is not that important of a character. Indeed, nothing is further from the truth. Tom is a critical character, from saving Frodo and his friends from death more than once, to bringing up complicated themes like pacifism, the power of the ring, and even eucatastrophe. So today we are going to get lost in the fog around Tom Bombadil. Joining me on today's wanderings is the author behind the blog Thoughts on Tolkien, who recently one-upped one of my tweets, which said, "Who is Tom Bombadil?" with this reply, "I'll do you one better. What is Tom Bombadil?" Please take a minute to hit that follow button. We are going to explore Rings of Power in the coming weeks, and you won't want to miss out. Also, if you love this episode, do me a favor and share it with a friend. I need your help in finding all the lost fans out there so that we can guide them through Middle-earth together. So tap that share button and send the link to someone you know that needs to explore Tolkien's world with you and I. Now, let's wander. Well, Ian, from Thoughts on Tolkien, welcome to the Lore of the Rings podcast.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Often when someone reads The Lord of the Rings for the first time, they encounter Tom Bombadil in the middle of the Old Forest. And one of their first questions that they ask is, who is Tom Bombadil? But you noted in your article and in your tweet to me that maybe who is Tom Bombadil is not exactly the right question. Maybe a better question might be, what is Tom Bombadil? Why do you think the question of what is more important than the question of who when it comes to Tom?
Well, it's a very interesting question, and I don't think that I really had thought about this a whole lot until I had read the letter that Tolkien wrote, where he says, Frodo asks in The Lord of the Rings to Goldberry, who is Tom Bombadil? And Tolkien writes in this letter, he says, But Frodo has failed to ask, what is Tom Bombadil? And perhaps he's asking the wrong question. And I think that resonated with me because when we think about Tom Bombadil, there's a lot of mystery surrounding him. But one of the things that people often compare him to is Treebeard. And there's good reason for that because Treebeard, looking ahead, is, another sort of character that's very closely tied in with nature. Just like Tom Bombadil, he's also called oldest. He's fatherless. He's the first Ent. And he's been there forever. And he talks about how long he's been on Middle-earth. And so we see that Treebeard is kind of this personality. And Tom Bombadil, I think, gets compared a lot to Treebeard. And one of the ways that I always thought about Treebeard and Tom Bombadil is people debate, well, who's older, Treebeard and Tom Bombadil? Because they're both called eldest at various points in The Lord of the Rings. And at one point, Treebeard is called the oldest living creature. And so kind of bouncing around in my head, thinking about Treebeard and Tom Bombadil was this idea that Treebeard is the oldest living creature because Tom Bombadil is not a living creature. And so when I read this letter by Tolkien about Frodo says, who is Tom Bombadil? But he doesn't ask, what is Tom Bombadil? Things started to kind of click for me. And I realized that I think Tom Bombadil is not what we would typically think of as a person, as a human being type character or an elf or a wizard or any of these other type things. He's something unique, And that's why this what question is a little bit more relevant. As you've gone through in your recent episodes, going through the pattern of master of wood, water, and hill, we tend to think about what does Tom do? He commands things. He has dominion over things. He sings. He goes through the forest and things like that. But we don't get the sort of inner psychology that we get with other characters, whether it be Frodo or Gandalf, or any of these other characters in Lord of the Rings. We don't get that sort of inner psychology with Tom, and perhaps that's because Tom doesn't quite have that same sort of inner psychological profile. So that's kind of there's a lot there, but that all of that kind of is bouncing around in my head when I think about who versus what is Tom Bombadil.
You bring up the connection of Tom and Treebeard, and I think it's only natural. A great manifestation of this is often a lot of Tom's scenes and several of his lines and descriptions are picked up by Treebeard in the Peter Jackson film adaptations. It just seems so natural for Treebeard to be helping Merry and Pippin out of the roots of a willow tree rather than Tom, and Treebeard saying almost word for word lines that Tom would have said had he been in the film, but Treebeard's there. So definitely you have that connection between them. And when you say that Tom is not necessarily that he is not a living creature, expound on that a little bit more. If Tom is not a living creature, then what is he in your view?
So I think that there's two levels to this answer. The first level is the outside of the text answer, which is that Tom really is, the historical background of Tom is that there was this Dutch doll that Tolkien had his kids played with, and the doll was named Tom Bombadil. I think Tolkien just came up with this name, Tom Bombadil, for him. The same way he comes up with many other things like the North Polar Bear and the Letters for Father Christmas, or Rover Random, which is a wonderful little story about a dog. And so he comes up with these stories and these names, and so this doll was just a toy that his kids played with named Tom Bombadil. And then he later comes up with a series of poems about this character, Tom Bombadil, who runs through the forest, who is recognizably the same, or at least a very similar character to the Lord of the Rings. And so then, as Tolkien is writing the Lord of the Rings early on, before he even realizes the kind of epic journey that it's going to become, he starts thinking about, well, I can insert certain things I've already written into this story to help me create a sequel for The Hobbit. So, one of the things is he takes the ring from The Hobbit and he turns it into this kind of the one ruling ring. And he takes some of the background of his mythology and he layers that in, where Aragorn, when he's still Strider, sings the song of Beren and Luthien for the hobbits. So he takes these sort of things and he says, well, I've already written this, so let me get some, add some word count, add some pages into my epic.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom Bombadil is one of these things that he just inserts in. And so to that extent, I think, Tom comes into Lord of the Rings kind of as an already developed character from the character in the poems that he had already written. And so the one answer to kind of what is Tom Bombadil is he represents certain themes that existed in Tolkien's mind in this sort of jolly character who's dancing through the forest, kind of a nature spirit. And that's kind of what he's inserted into the narrative to represent these certain themes. Now, there's a lot of those various themes. In one letter, he says he's the spirit of the vanishing Oxford and Berkshire countryside, which Tolkien loved and felt that industrialization was kind of marring. But there's the second answer, which and it's unclear if this is an answer that Tolkien intentionally understood at the time he was writing The Lord of the Rings, or if this is something that Tolkien later came to realize, that this is what Tom Bombadil meant in the story. I haven't really, dug too deeply to kind of figure out if Tolkien knew exactly what he was doing. Tolkien was so brilliant and such a masterful writer and so knowledgeable about all the different aspects of his life that sometimes, and not sometimes, oftentimes, he would kind of happen upon accidentally or subconsciously write these sort of masterful themes into his work. And later he'd go back and revise it and make it even better. But, sometimes he would do these things unintentionally. And so it's not clear if this, I guess, second answer is intentional or later he comes to realize it. But there is a letter that is not actually published in the letters of JRR Tolkien, but it is available online for people who want to read it. And it was put online by the Tolkien scholars Christina Scull and Wayne Hammond. And in that letter, Tolkien kind of, you can piece together the answer he gives in that letter from various other letters that he writes. But in that letter, which is written to his friend Neville Coghill, who was an Inkling and who collaborated with his son on a few translations of Chaucer, in that letter, Neville Coghill is writing to him in, I think, 1954, and he's asking him a bunch of questions about the Fellowship of the Ring after it comes out. And so Tolkien kind of responds to Neville Coghill and says, well, I think you got to wait on the answers to these questions until you read The Two Towers and The Return of the King. But one of the questions that he does kind of answer is Neville Coghill's question of, what's Bombadil? And so he tells Neville Coghill, Bombadil is, quote, there as a reminder of the truth, as I see it, that the world is so large and manifold that if you take one facet and fix your mind and heart on it, there is always something that does not come into that story, argument, approach, and seems to belong to a larger story. But of course, in another way, not that of pure story making, Bombadil is a deliberate contrast to the elves who are artists. But Bombadil does not want to make, alter, devise, or control anything, just to observe and take joy in the contemplating the things that are not himself, the spirit of this earth made aware of itself. He is more like science, utterly free from technological blemish and history than art. He represents the complete fearlessness of that spirit when we can catch a little of it. And he goes on to say more.
Wow, that's amazing.
I think that sort of sentence in the middle, and actually there's a deleted word. He says the spirit of the world, and then he deleted world, and he scratched it out, and he wrote the earth. The spirit of this earth made aware of itself. And so I think that is what, whether it was intentional on his part or whether he comes later to realize in the course of writing that this is what he's written, I think the answer of what Tom Bombadil is he's a spirit representing nature itself, the world itself, as if there were a person whose nature personified, and he's in the world. And so, yes, he does have dominion and control over the wood, water, and hill, the natural things. And he's unaffected generally by this sort of moral evil of the ring. We see he can put on the ring and be unaffected, the same way that the ring can lie dormant in the River Anduin for hundreds of years, and the River Anduin goes on, and nature is unaffected by this ring sitting in it. There's no natural beings like fish or animals that are attempting to steal the ring or grab it or anything like that. They're unaffected by it. But at the same time, there's this real thing that while nature is unaffected, internally by moral evil, it's not tempted by the moral evil of the ring. It can still be ruined by it. And so we see that at the Council of Elrond, Gandalf and Elrond think that, look, if Bombadil, as much power as he has, if Sauron wins, he will still fall. He will still fall last as he was first. And so there's this idea that and this also comes from the same letter. Tolkien says, quote, I do suggest that it is possible to fear, as I do, that the making artistic subcreative spirit of men and elves is actually more potent and can, quote, fall and that it could, in the eventual triumph of its own evil, destroy the whole earth, and Bombadil and all, end quote. So, I think there's this idea that in some ways, Bombadil and nature itself are immune to certain effects of evil, but on the other hand, they can still fall, they can still be ruined by bad people in the world. And so that's I think what the secondary answer is. Inside of the text, he represents this spirit of the earth made aware of itself.
Wow, that is such a beautiful thought. Yeah, it's definitely easy to see when you look at the chapters that Tom Bombadil is featured. You can definitely see that he is that personification of nature. But the way that you quoted how Tolkien articulated that the spirit of the earth that is now aware of itself. I mean, that is a beautiful thought. And my guess is, knowing what I know about Tolkien and what I've observed about him, is that he's probably writing along. Tom Bombadil pops into this story, and Tolkien is likely just as surprised as you and I and everybody who reads this to say, "Oh, Tom actually is in Middle Earth." And then he goes back and as he thinks about it after, he starts to fill in the pieces of what his subconscious was putting together. And it's so cool to hear Tolkien sort of think about his own works in that way. That's pretty amazing.
Why are so many dogs suffering from health issues? Actress Katherine Heigl, who's helped save over 16,000 dogs through her foundation, says she's seeing more issues with dogs' joints, odors, and health than ever before. And after doing a ton of research, she feels there's one place we can look to support any dog's health: their food. So she decided to create something she could actually feel good about feeding her dogs. It's called Superfood Complete. Superfood Complete is made with over 30 of the healthiest ingredients on the planet, including several superfoods vital to your dog's health. Badlands Ranch also sponsors the Jason Debus Heigl Foundation, which has helped rescue thousands of dogs and place them in loving homes. Dogs across America are trying this food and experiencing amazing health benefits. Go to badlandsranch.com/save50 and order right now to get up to 50% off your regular price order with a 90-day money-back guarantee. If you want your dog to experience all these incredible things, go to badlandsranch.com/save50 today.
Are you as excited as I am for season 2 of Amazon Prime's Rings of Power? Well, it's coming. Between August 19 and August 29, I'm releasing daily mini episodes right here on this feed to get you pumped and prepared for the big premiere. Each episode is a quick dive into what to watch, listen to, and explore as we count down together. Head over to ringspodcast.com/count to join the journey and never miss a beat. That's ringspodcast.com/count. Let's count down to season 2 together, one day at a time. I do want to dig a little bit deeper into Tom's quote unquote immunity to the ring, right? So he's notably unaffected by the One Ring. He takes the One Ring from Frodo. Well, he doesn't take it. Frodo gives it to him just willingly. The ring seems to like get bigger before it gets to Tom, but then as soon as it's like in Tom's hand, it kind of like shrinks down and it is almost like a week before Tom. Everyone else who comes across the ring, even good-hearted Samwise Gamgee, is tempted to use the ring for their own purposes, as good as those purposes may be at the beginning. But not Tom Bombadil. He plays with the ring. He's like a jokester at a circus. It's just a trinket. He's doing these parlor tricks. He doesn't disappear when he puts it on. He can see Frodo when Frodo puts on the ring. What do you think Tolkien was trying to convey about Tom's nature and his role in the story, his place in Middle Earth, through this unaffectedness by the power of the One Ring?
Well, I think there's two things to keep in mind. The first is kind of less serious than the second, which is to remember that Tom is a trickster. He is a goofball. He's a silly guy, and that predates his origin in Lord of the Rings and goes back to the series of poems Tolkien wrote before he ever wrote the Lord of the Rings, and that's kind of in his nature. So I think a lot of the sort of interaction between Frodo and the hobbits in that ring scene. Some of that is colored a little by Tom's trickster, silly nature, but there is a deeper and more serious message that's being conveyed, and it's in line with the message that's sent by other characters. And so this is the aspect of Tom that I think is most relevant to the ring, which is that the ring tempts you to master others. It tempts you to rule, to control others.
To dominate.
You think about the words of the ring verse, to to find, to bring, to bind. And so that's the words to dominate Middle Earth. Sauron develops this ring, and he's going to dominate all of elves, men, and dwarves. And he uses it to kind of master everyone else on Middle Earth. And so the ring itself, with this inherent mastery and domination built into it, tempts everyone who comes near it with this same sort of desire to control and to master others around them. Or even not necessarily others. You look at Sam's temptation, for example. Sam's temptation is to have a garden and to have, the greatest garden in Middle Earth, Sam the master gardener. And so this is not necessarily a temptation to master other people, but it is still a temptation to master the natural world. And so Tom, by being unaffected by the ring, Tolkien is conveying to us this idea that Tom is not someone who seeks the mastery of others. He's content within himself with who he is. And so this goes to this idea that Tom doesn't care about the dominion of others, even though he's called master. And this calls back to the conversation Frodo has with Goldberry, where Frodo says, "Who is he?" And Goldberry says, "He is the master." And Frodo says, "So does he own all of this land?" And Goldberry says, "No, that would indeed be a burden." And so he is the master of the natural world, but he doesn't own the land. He doesn't seek dominion and control over it. He is content with himself. And that also goes to jumping ahead to the Barrow Downs, where the hobbits wish that Bombadil could come with them. And Tom says, "No, I am in my own territory. I cannot leave my boundaries." And this is even discussed at the Council of Elrond, where they say, "Should we have summoned Bombadil to the council?" And Gandalf, I think, says, "No, he would not come. He is enclosed in his own boundaries, and he will not leave," because he understands his own boundaries. And all of this is so delicately woven together, because you see both Tom's renunciation of a desire to master others, but you also see how he really is this sort of spirit of the natural world. Because you think about, Tom talks about how he wanders the earth in days long gone, and obviously the elves are familiar with him. Elrond talks about, years and years ago I knew him. So clearly he at one point ventured out from the old forest, and at some point we hear that at one point the forests of Fangorn and the old forest were connected together.
Right.
And yet we hear now that Tom lives in a little land that has boundaries. And so we see that over time, as elves and men and Sauron and all these different entities, as they branch out and expand their world and expand their conquest of various lands and things like that, Tom's dominion and Tom's realm of wandering over Middle-earth shrinks. So once upon a time, he wandered the whole earth as it was empty. And then over time, it shrinks and shrinks. And now, as other people fill up the lands of Middle-earth, his realm, this sort of untrammeled beauty of nature, is now just this small little old forest, and he won't leave the boundaries. So as other people's interaction with nature grows, Tom shrinks and shrinks in his boundaries. And that ties into also where Tolkien says that Tom represents this sort of spirit of the vanishing Oxford countryside, where he felt that as industrialization in England was growing, this sort of beautiful rural landscape that he loved growing up was also shrinking and diminishing. So all these different things are so deftly woven and tied together in the character of Tom.
Yeah, I love that you kind of say that there's a lot of complicated themes and different things going on here, and it is that really intricate weaving together in the story, the character, the actions of Tom Bombadil. Yeah, that's a really beautiful thought. Um, I want to go a little bit deeper as well, and dig a little bit into the idea of Arda unmarred. Now, for the casual Lord of the Rings fan, Arda is not necessarily a term that we use often, but essentially that is the term that the elves would use to refer to the world or Earth. And this concept of Arda unmarred is sort of the world in its perfect natural state, the way that it was created in the beginning. Um, and in the article that you sent me, you have some great thoughts about how Tom represents Arda unmarred, this unfallen natural world. Could you elaborate a little bit on how Tom connects to the idea of Arda unmarred and what that means for Middle Earth?
Absolutely. So, Arda Unmarred, for folks who have not read the Silmarillion, there is a character called Morgoth, and he is sort of the Satan figure of Middle Earth. He's the greatest of the angels, and Sauron is just a servant of him. This gets a brief mention in the Lord of the Rings, where Gandalf says, "And Sauron is but a servant himself."
Mhm.
And so
And I think at one
Morgoth,
point Legolas refers to like a Balrog of Morgoth. I think he refers to that when they're in
yes,
Lothlorien.
yes.
So
So the
yeah.
Balrog of Morgoth, he is one of the lesser demons who serves this satanic figure of Morgoth. And so the concept of Morgoth in the beginning of the world is that Arda, which is Tolkien's word for the world, Earth, um, is created, and it's good. Just like in Genesis, you hear, God created the heavens and the earth, and it was good. And then Morgoth goes into Arda, and he does to Arda what Sauron does to the ring. He invests his power and his malice into it, and Morgoth wants to dominate Arda and make it his. He's jealous of this beautiful creation of God, who Tolkien calls Iluvatar. And so he wants to make Arda his. He wants to dominate Arda, just like Sauron wants to dominate the peoples of Middle Earth. And so Sauron invests his power into a ring and uses that ring to dominate other people. Morgoth invests his power into the earth, and seeks to dominate and control the earth. Of course, he also seeks to dominate and control the peoples of Middle Earth. But so originally, this sort of process by which Morgoth seeks to invest his power into Arda is what Tolkien called Arda Marred. And to some extent, it is tied up with this sort of underlying biblical theme of the fallen world after Eden is lost. But it's not. Some people try to make that too close of analogy. It's not quite the same thing, because Arda is marred before any elves or men make some sort of moral fall. So that's not like there's a Adam and Eve moment that leads to the marring of Arda. It's more of once Morgoth falls and he enters into the world, he starts to warp the good foundations of Arda. And so Tom alludes to this. Tom says that I was here before the Dark Lord came from outside. And so this is what he's talking about: is Tom was there on the earth before Morgoth came and before Morgoth began to pour his malice and spirit into Arda. Now, for those who are familiar with the Silmarillion, you might realize that this doesn't quite line up with the timeline in the published Silmarillion. So Morgoth actually in the published Silmarillion comes into Arda, or into the world before Arda really even exists. He comes into the universe, and he and the other angels together sort of form Arda as a world. But that published Silmarillion version doesn't quite line up with the timeline that Tom kind of talks about. Of course, Tolkien never actually finished the Silmarillion while he was alive. But anyway, all of that backstory aside, so that's kind of what we mean when we talk about Arda marred versus unmarred. And so Tom existed on the earth before Morgoth marred it. And so that's one way that he's directly tied to this idea of Arda unmarred. But in another way, when you start looking closely at how Tom describes himself, he talks about his connection to the natural world. And so we've already kind of talked about that: wood, water, and hill. And so the other way is that his world is closed off from the outside world. He's not interested in the affairs of men or elves per se. Obviously, he helps the hobbits when they come into his realm, but he doesn't want to go to the council. If they had called him, he would not come. And so, in that sense, he represents this idea of the original Earth, unbothered by men or elves or Morgoth, this sort of original paradise that is what it is. In another way, Tolkien talks about how Tom sort of represents a strand of pacifism in this story. That, as much as we love the fact that Tom does not try to dominate others, he also is not particularly interested in the quest of destroying the ring. Gandalf notes at the end of The Lord of the Rings, our quest would probably be of little note to Tom. He would not be quite interested in the fact that we destroyed this great evil. And yet we know that it was so important to all the peoples of Middle-earth, and to Tom himself too, that the ring was destroyed, because that's what enables him to keep living. And so this idea of nature is peaceful is an important theme for Tolkien. But Tolkien also says that in the view of Elrond, and I think we're meant to understand implicitly in Tolkien's view, while pacifism has an important place, sometimes just war is needed. Sometimes you do have to take a stand against the forces of evil. And so in that way, there's this sort of positive aspect of Tom as the pacifist, but there's also an implicit critique there of the natural world. The natural world is this wonderful place and doesn't care about evil, but evil will still come for the natural world if the natural world is does nothing against it. And I guess the last thing I would say about this idea of Arda Unmarred is that it's this place where the hurts of the world have not yet happened. I mean, we can trace a lot, or perhaps most, of the evil in Tolkien's Legendarium back to Morgoth, and everything flows out from Morgoth as a sort of chain of evil. The various things that he does to men and to elves and to the other angelic spirits called the Valar. And so Tom sort of represents, what if the world had not been marred? What if the world were still this sort of paradise? And I think that's part of the reason why we see Frodo get his vision, his dream of the future, in Tom Bombadil's house. So when the hobbits are staying there, very early in the story, Frodo gets this dream that in the movie you've seen the scene with Pippin and Gandalf in Minas Tirith, and Pippin asks Gandalf, what's death like? And Gandalf says, green. The
gray ray curtain pulls back, and a far sunrise and a far green country. Yes.
If people are dieting now more than ever before, then why are nearly 1 in 3 American adults overweight? Dr. Gundry, who's helped thousands lose weight and feel younger and healthier than ever, says most people are not getting enough fat-burning MCTs from their food. MCTs are a special kind of compound that, instead of turning into fat when you consume it, turns into ketones, which is a chemical that breaks down the excess fat in your body. So, by getting more MCTs in your diet, you essentially flip a switch that puts your body in caloric bypass mode, which can flush out excess fat and calories. And he's created an easy way for you to activate caloric bypass right at home. It's called MCT Wellness. This powerful blend of fat-flushing MCT powders and antioxidant-rich polyphenols is designed to help you unlock your body's fat-burning, energy-producing potential. What's even better is that it's a delicious drink. I love how incredible it tastes. All you do is add a scoop to water, enjoy, and watch as you start feeling slimmer and more energized. So, if you want to experience a quick, easy, and effective way to melt pounds fast, go to GundryMD.com/energy and order right now to get up to 53% off your regular price order with a 90-day money-back guarantee. Again, that's GUNDRYMD.com/energy.
Are you as excited as I am for Season 2 of Amazon Prime's Rings of Power? Well, it's coming. Between August 19 and August 29, I'm releasing daily mini episodes right here on this feed to get you pumped and prepared for the big premiere. Each episode is a quick dive into what to watch, listen to, and explore as we count down together. Head over to ringspodcast.com/count to join the journey and never miss a beat. That's ringspodcast.com/count. Let's count down to Season 2 together, one day at a time.
A green country under a swift sunrise, right? And so it's this
go.
beautiful moment. It's a beautiful description by Tolkien, and I'm glad that Peter Jackson did get it in there. But this description of Valinor, of the land of the angels and the gods, almost like a heaven description, this comes to Frodo in a dream in the house of Tom Bombadil. And I think it's important that it comes there, and this relates to this idea of Arda Unmarred, because Tom's house and Tom's domain is this domain of being unaffected, as we talked about, by this desire to rule others. And nowhere else in Middle-earth do we really see this. You know, we think of the havens of goodness in Middle-earth. We think of Rivendell with Elrond. We think of Lothlorien with Galadriel. And yet, when we think about that, you know, Elrond says, "Do not give the ring to me." Gandalf says, "Do not give the ring to me. Do not tempt me." We see Galadriel's temptation directly in Lothlorien, where, you know, for a second there, she really thinks about, you know, I would become this terrible queen. You know, and we see even somebody as humble and simple as Sam tempted by the ring. The only person in the story who's not tempted by the ring, over whom the ring has no control, is Tom Bombadil. This sort of, you know, ambivalent spirit of nature. And so the reason I think why Frodo gets this vision of his future in the house of Tom Bombadil is because after Frodo destroys the ring, we see how he's permanently changed. He's permanently wounded by this burden of carrying the ring, and he's lost a part of himself. And you can see, you know, he'll never be the same person again. And yet his hope of healing is this hope that he will be healed from this ring that is the focus of domination and mastery of other people and other things. And so his hope is that he will be able to go and be healed of the domination of the ring. And so he receives this vision of his future healing, you know, overcoming the domination of the ring in a place where the ring has no power, in a place where you have a person who is not tempted by the ring. So Frodo sees hopefully a glimpse of his future healing in a place where the ring has no power. He's seeing kind of a prophecy. You are going to receive healing, and you are going to be in the same place Bombadil is. The ring will no longer have any power over you. And that's what Frodo wants. Frodo wants to be healed from his long burden of carrying this ring and the toll that the quest took on him. And so he receives that vision in a place where the ring has no power. And that's what he wants, is to never have had this burden in the first place. So all of that, Arda Unmarred and Mastery and Dominion again, are so just deftly woven together.
Yeah, that's a really insightful way to look at Frodo's dream there. Like, is there really any other place in Middle Earth where he could have that sort of dream of his future vision of I'm transitioning from Middle Earth to now Valinor, this land of the gods and the angels, where I can be fully healed, where I could be, shall we say, restored to his unmarred state of before the ring and before the toll that the quest took on him.
Yeah, and we see a hint of that with Tom when he rescues the hobbits from the barrow. He says, you know, he vanishes the white, and he kind of has this little poem where he's vanishing the white, and he says, you know, he says this phrase, "Till the world is mended." And so, you know, I think that that points to one, it points to another symbolic aspect of Tom, which we haven't talked about yet, but it also points to this idea of Tolkien has, in the history of Middle Earth, there were some unfinished writings that Christopher published. And one of the things he talks about is this idea of Arda healed. So we have Arda Unmarred, this sort of created world before Morgoth ruins it. Then we have Arda Marred, where Morgoth ruins it. And then Tolkien had this sort of vision at the end of time where Arda would be healed, where the natural world would be healed of all the hurts of Morgoth. And that's what Tom's talking about when he vanishes the Barrow White. He says, you know, till the world is mended. He's talking about this idea of the earth being healed. And so he's looking forward to that. as well.
Love that. I have one final question for you about Tom's mysterious nature and perhaps intentionally mysterious nature and the implications of that in the upcoming Amazon's Rings of Power season 2, where we know Tom's going to be. But before we get to that question, if someone who's listening today would like to engage more with your work or with your blog, where should they go?
Sure, my blog is thoughtsontolkien.wordpress.com. And then I am on Twitter as Tolkien Thoughts. And the concept of the blog is very simple. I just share thoughts about Tolkien, his works, and his life.
All right, that's awesome. So again, that's thoughtsontolkien.wordpress.com. And then on Twitter at Tolkien Thoughts. Is that right?
Yep.
All right, fantastic. All right, let's dig into I think probably this final line of thinking about Tom. Tom intentionally perhaps is a bit of a mystery. He's a bit of an enigma. Tolkien sort of just let him be a mystery. You quoted one of Tolkien's letters, I think, in that article, but I'm going to paraphrase it here. But Tolkien essentially said, like, there's not a lot of value in philosophizing over Tom, like over analyzing him or trying to read too much into a story. Now we've just spent the last 30, 40 minutes over analyzing Tom and trying to dig into him a little bit. But I think it's really interesting here that Tom is usually left out of on-screen adaptations. He's not in the Peter Jackson films. He's not in any of the animated films. But however, Amazon's Rings of Power season 2, which has not come out yet as of this recording, they plan to bring in some Tom Bombadil. There's fan bases on both sides that say Rings of Power is great, it's fantastic, and other side that says Rings of Power is a travesty and not connected to the lore at all. I tend to oscillate between those two camps. What are your opinions on a future on-screen adaptation of Tom Bombadil, and specifically by the Rings of Power showrunners that Amazon has been providing us so far?
So I think that this is a complicated question, as you acknowledge, and everybody has, different views on it. My personal thoughts are, I think, given what we have seen of season 1 of The Rings of Power, the characterizations for, well, in part the characterizations, but in greater part the storylines and the plots diverge pretty strongly from kind of the outlines of what Tolkien has given us. And so to that extent, I think I'm not really concerned about Bombadil being in there, just because I don't think that he's going to be so closely connected to what Tolkien has written that it will, I guess, ruin my vision or my idea of Bombadil. I kind of look at these things as there's different levels. So there's sort of at the highest form of a movie characterizing a book is this idea that watching the movie actually enhances your reading of the book. It's kind of as good as the book or even better. And then there's kind of a lower level where, wow, that was a really wonderful illustration of the book. And some people might put Peter Jackson's films in that category. Then there's kind of maybe another level down where I just didn't really think that's the case. I don't like the book, the way the movie portrayed the books. And then there's kind of a lower level down where, oh, this ruins the books for me. I can't even read the books anymore because this was so bad.
Right.
Some people feel that way, I guess, about some of the things in the Hobbit films, where they just feel like it just left such a sour taste in their mouth. So I tend to look at it as, I think that the way they write this has been so kind of divergent. And really, when we see Tom in Lord of the Rings, or we see Tom in the poems, The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, it's in a format, it's in scenes and locations that really we aren't going to see in the Rings of Power. And so Tom's going to be kind of removed from his traditional Tolkien context. And so I think that he's going to be sufficiently divorced from that context that people can enjoy or dislike whoever the character of Tom Bombadil is that they put in this show without it affecting negatively their love for Bombadil in the books. Of course, a lot of people don't like Bombadil in the books either. So,
Right. Right.
In some ways,
Controversial character.
maybe you're right. In some ways, maybe for people who don't like Tom in the books, who kind of find him too silly or too annoying, a more toned down Bombadil or a more serious Bombadil, which we're not quite sure what he will do on screen, but some of the screenshots of him that have been posted in teasers and things like that perhaps indicate he'll be a more somber character. It's just me speculating, but some people may like that.
Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying, and yeah, I've seen some of those images that have come from production, and Tom definitely looks very serious and somewhat like a lecturing father, and to me, I mean, if we don't get Tom singing "Ring a Ding Dillo," at least once, then I'm gonna be like, nah, you didn't do it, you didn't do it faithfully. Rings of Power, that's gonna be me. That's like my deal breaker. He's got to sing at least one time "Ring a Ding Dillo," right? And with his blue jacket and his yellow boots, I'm looking forward to that. So I guess we'll see. Jury's still out as of this recording. We're about a month away from Rings of Power season 2. We don't know exactly when Tom's going to show up there, or what he's going to be doing, or how his character is going to be portrayed. But we'll look forward to seeing Tom in his on-screen debut.
Save on O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner. Get 2 cans of O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner for just $8. Valid in-store only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Are you as excited as I am for Season 2 of Amazon Prime's Rings of Power? Well, it's coming. Between August 19 and August 29, I'm releasing daily mini episodes right here on this feed to get you pumped and prepared for the big premiere. Each episode is a quick dive into what to watch, listen to, and explore as we count down together. Head over to ringspodcast.com/count to join the journey and never miss a beat. That's ringspodcast.com/count. Let's count down to Season 2 together, one day at a time.